1958, and I had pictures of it, pictures of pictures, and I couldn't hardly read those old pictures, so I had to transcribe it into a Word document, and then I put it on Facebook in pieces as I was doing that. And so that history is a very good history, and I would invite you to look at that, because we can't name all of the history and say all the dates and all that in 30 minutes, but I want to talk today a little bit about how history is dynamic, how it involves everyone, our audience, people that are listening to us. Everybody has a history, and they're no different from me.
And I guess for me to say something's extraordinary or a person's extraordinary over our history, I might have a different perspective than somebody else. I mean, there's going to be a lot of people out there that say, well, heck, you're forgetting this person. So
exactly right, because as we talk, everybody who's listening is going to say, hey, I know him, and I did that, and I was there, and everybody's involved in this history. And so I want to make a disclaimer to start with. I'm doing this program because you thought I was old enough to remember a lot of history. And I am a little old. I'll be 85 in a few days, August 22nd. And so I'm not as young as I used to be. But I'm doing this history because you thought I was old enough to be an observer.
Fair enough.
And not because I made the history.
Yeah.
So as I talk about these things, I consider myself to have been fortunate enough to have been a part of this community for a long time, and I hope that these discussions will encourage our listeners to establish relationships that will provide their own insights, and maybe they'll encourage their children to do the same, and we continue this history. So that's what our purpose of this is, to study our counties, to encourage everybody to study our county's history. I want to invite you, look up on the Facebook page, Doyle Akins, and find my program on the find my history on Facebook. And if you want to email me at drakins@live.com, I'll send you a copy of this, but we won't have time to talk about the entire history of the state. So I want to encourage our listeners to do that. I'm going to use a sample of historic topics or categories to encourage everybody to find out more and to ponder how they fit into these past events. Now, in doing so, I have to look at my own history because, and I encourage everybody to do that. Just think about how you fit into this and how you become a part of Carroll County's 200-year history, because we celebrate that. We celebrate that with the country's history also at the same time. And I was a part of that 50 years ago as we did that. But I was born a hillbilly in Dalton, Georgia, and I grew up there and lived there, except for a few years. When I was 3, I lived in Marietta. I was born just a few weeks before World War II. And so I don't remember a lot of those things, but I was young, but I remember a lot. When I was 3, we moved to Marietta, and my father worked at the Bell Bomber plant, which is now Lockheed. And I remember I lived at 1318 Fraser Circle in Marietta, Georgia. As a 3-year-old, I knew that. And I attended a 3-room school with 2 grades in each room. Somehow I was 3rd and 4th grade. I was with a cousin of mine, and she didn't want me there 2 years, so she put me into 4th grade. So I skipped a grade there. But somehow in all this, and in high school through working, I must have learned that relationships are important. My teachers were strict, supportive. My cousin was a police chief, and I knew the mayor. I knew, my song leader was a representative in the state legislature and allowed me to be a page at the state capitol for a week, along with a friend of mine.
When I got to do it, it was just like 2 hours.
That's right. I stayed in a hotel. Then later on, I was in the Highway Club and represented our Highway Club in the at Mock Legislature. So I've been involved with the state and history and things of that nature. But I graduated in '58 and came to West Georgia. And the things that I have learned here happened early. I met my wife in the first few weeks here. I came here on a Sunday. My daddy brought me here. We didn't have money. Nobody had money back then. Somebody asked me the other day, if you could take a child back to when you were a child, what would be the greatest shock? And I said, the greatest shock would probably be that you have to work for every dime you get. The first job I had was in a little country store, one-room store owned by one man. I was 9 years old, and he paid me Saturday to work to help customers or maybe put things on the shelf and do little things, and paid me 50 cents for the whole day. So that was I started my work career. That's why I worked at the radio station, because you had to work. My daddy put me out, gave me a check for the amount of money which was probably $700 for the first quarter, and room and board and all included at West Georgia, and it said to me, if you want any more money, you better get you a part-time job. So I've had a lot of jobs as I was growing up trying to do. But I did meet my wife the first few weeks at West Georgia. She was a student at the high school, and I got involved. And after a few get-togethers, she invited me to her home where I met her parents, Stuart and Agnes Martin. And to my surprise, I recognized her father as the man who had given a welcome speech to all the incoming West Georgia students a few weeks before that, and I realized that Stuart Martin was mayor of Carrollton. And that became not only a marriage, but a wonderful opportunity to develop many relationships that really put me where I am today. And because he was involved in a lot of things, and I've been a lot of things. And so I want to take a few examples today of people who are part of Carroll County's history. So many things. I have to mention the church. I've been involved in church all my life, and recently, last year, I was chairman of the committee that celebrated Tabernacle Baptist Church's 125th anniversary. So we put together a history for that, and I had a lot of documentation for that from him. But just as a story, just as an example of how we're involved, and everybody who's listening is involved in history. In my first few weeks in Carrollton, I was able to make friends with a number of people in town, and so I met Lee Griffin, and he knew I needed to work. He asked me if I wanted to work a couple of days at the Chevrolet dealership, helping serve hot dogs and things for the introduction of the 1959 Chevrolets. Back then they kept the cars under wrap, and nobody knew what they looked like, and they had an unveiling day, and a weekend. He said, okay, I can get you a job to help there. And, I knew Susan Hayward lived in Carrollton, but I didn't know her husband owned the dealership. I just showed up to work, and I asked, I said, hey, what do I do? And they said, well, ask that lady over there what she wants you to do. So I stepped up beside her, and she told me, you serve the Cokes while I make the hot dogs, and we'll do this. And, and after a little while, she introduced herself as Mrs. Chalkley, and then Susan Hayward. and that became the first of many encounters and conversations with Susan Hayward, who has certainly made a part of Carrollton a part of our history. And I went to work at Colonial Store for a long time, and she would shop in there. My wife worked for a dentist, and she bought a truck for her farm, and because it had, I think, used truck because it had a spotlight on top, and she could see the cattle out on the farm out there. But anyway, so many other things. But she became involved in this community. She worked a lot of things. She helped build the Catholic Church out there. She worked with the hospital. She was good friends of the first administrator of the hospital, made contributions there. She worked with my father-in-law with the March of Dimes. Hey, that's a part of history that not a lot of people know about. It was a big deal. March of Dimes was a big deal. As Jonas Salk developed the vaccine, and it was a shot, not a sugar tablet or anything, back when we first got those shots. But Dr. Salk was in the development of this, and the contributions to March of Dimes played a big part in that. And there was they had divided the country up in districts. And my father-in-law was and a guy named, if I can remember his name, but anyway, a couple of them chaired that district. it winds up that this district here that they did raised more money for the March of Dimes than anybody in the United States. And as a celebration of the end of that thing, Dave Garraway did a special Today Show from Warm Springs, where the president had made our state famous, and Eleanor was there, and Eleanor Roosevelt was there, and my father-in-law, Stuart Martin, was there, and the other guy, I can't call his name right now.
And Stuart Martin is the Martin in Martin and Hightower, right?
That's correct. Yeah. That's correct. And but anyway, they did a special Today Show from Warm Springs celebrating the fact that Carrollton raised more money for the March of Dimes than any other district in this area. It involves other counties, not just Carrollton. So she was an important part. Such an important part of our history that a local artist, Alan Kuykendall, painted a mural of her on the side of the new Carrollton Arts Center. And unfortunately, it was determined that it violated a city ordinance. The city ordinance was created to stop rogue artists from doing unauthorized paintings of crazy things on buildings around, but the mural of Susan had to be taken down and erased, and it's gone. But I can tell you a secret. Watch for the new development as it opens up in early 1927 down beside the Art Center. We may see another mural of Susan Hayward.
There is scuttlebutt. Let me take a break right here. I mean, again, if you're listening to us, I think we're only on AM this morning because something happened to the FM and happened to our computer system. So I think we're just broadcasting on AM, and I wish everybody would get to hear this interview and Doyle talking. But let me say something about our sponsor, Community Voice,
Sure.
Brought to you by Tanner Health. If you get a busted knee, go to Tanner. If you're having some heart pains, go on into Tanner. Any other problems that Tanner should solve? Willowbrook, Tanner, and just Tanner Health, Higgins and Bremen. You know, if you're feeling bad, go to Tanner Health. That's our commercial today, since we don't have anything. Back to you, Doyle.
We're going to be talking about Tanner, and it's part in the history of this thing. Also, I want to emphasize that as a part of our program, I want our listeners to really think about the fact that history is dynamic. Relationships are dynamic. I talk about Susan Hayward here as if it was just some part of history, but I knew her. Other people knew her. Everybody in Carrollton knew her. She was very, her two sons from a previous marriage, Jess Barker.
And nobody really bugged her either, right?
What?
Nobody really bothered her either, did they?
No. She was just part of the thing and doing her part. But her sons went to Carrollton, and so her sons Greg and Tim went to Carrollton High School. They were just ordinary people, but you keep these relationships. Greg, amazingly, talking about preparing for this thing, this past week sent me a message that his brother Tim, Greg lives in L.A., and his brother Tim, who lived in Fort Payne, Alabama, passed away on April the 27th. And Greg was able to bring his two daughters from L.A. to the funeral there. And after the funeral, he said, we came back to Carrollton, had a good lunch at the Brown Dog, and I carried my daughters out to the Catholic Church and showed them Susan Hayward's grave. So these things, if you keep up with people and you keep relationships, it's just amazing what you continue to know.
That is nice.
And we're going to talk about the radio station for a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
This radio station has a history. You have a history. I was talking, you've been here a long time. You worked longer than I did, and you've been here longer than I ever worked here. So, and I never worked here part-time. Full-time. I was always part-time. But this station was established, help me, 1931.
Sounds good to me.
I think I'm dreaming that up.
WLBB itself?
Yes, WLBB.
Okay.
And Roy
And it
Richards.
wasn't necessarily AM 1330, right?
No, it was 1100.
Okay.
WLBB 1100 at that time. And Roy Richards and other business people were the first owners of WLBB. It was located on the square in an upstairs building. And so this radio station has played an important role in our history, not only in keeping our citizens informed of what's going on, but in helping young people get careers. We
And
have
old people, too.
Getting their careers started in music and broadcasting. And I'll give you just a few quick examples of that. Ken Vassy, the son of one of the first managers, has had a lifelong career in music in Los Angeles. Alan Duke went from WLVB to a long career with CNN, most of that out of Los Angeles, and I still communicate with him occasionally. Spoke about Chris Clackham. He left here for a career as a news correspondent with NBC. He's retired now, but I still communicate. Just a few weeks ago, he sent me a picture of a UPI printout that he tore off the old ticker UPI machine and read as a news flash on WLVB the story of President Nixon's resignation after Watergate. And so Chris went on to tell the news on NBC for many years. John McClellan furthered his radio career in Tifton while furthering his education to become a lawyer. He's now a judge in Rome and uses radio voice as a PA announcer for the Rome Wolves for almost as many years as I've announced the Trojan Band. And he celebrated his 73rd birthday a week ago. Lowell White, WLBB newsman extraordinary, he memorized this news. He never looked at his notes. I'm having to read these things. but he didn't read. He memorized them and just went on the air, and he could do a 15-minute radio news story without looking at the copy. I talked about Radford Hamrick, an old person who wrote this news story that I published for the People's Bank. Wrote that news story. His son Terry worked here and at the radio station. There were others. Lee Smith, good friend of mine, we worked together for years here and became an attorney. He's a municipal judge in Carrollton for many years. Jack, Colin, you've been here for years. So this radio station has really been a part. And a very special one that I want to talk about this morning. I was teaching at Bowden, working here part-time, when one of my students and a drummer in the Bowden band, which at that time was great. They made records. It was a great band. Michael Huey asked me if I could get him a part-time job at the radio station. He knew there was a large record library here and he could listen to music, but he knew that musicians and their agents sometimes at that time would stop by the station and try to get their records played more. And he was in a band. He worked a short time here, and he was in a band named the Kenningstons, and then Ate Up With Soul, and some of these people, and they became very famous around. But then he became a really famous drummer, one of the most famous drummers in the United States. If any of our listeners want to know about Mike's career, please go to Wikipedia and look it up. There are 6 pages. He's one of the most famous drummers ever in the United States.
What's his last name, Doyle?
I'm sorry.
What's his last name?
Huey.
Mike Huey. Okay.
Michael Huey. That's the musician, not the artist. When you look it up on Wikipedia,
okay.
There's 6 pages, and it's an amazing history.
Wow, yeah.
Now, I'm so sorry to report, Mike Huey passed away this week, Monday, August 3rd, at 9:50 Pacific time at his home in Los Angeles after about a 2 or 3 year battle with a neurological disease. His bass player, Jim Street, did a fitting tribute to Mike on Facebook. Notified me about it, and of course, and Jim wants to know how he can hear a recording of this program. Help me remember to get that to Jim. But it was just really, really an amazing career, and I hate that has come about this week as I'm doing that history. But you know, that's the way we do. We come and we go, but the history continues. And one more quick story just to give you an idea of the extent of his career. Not only was I was in Atlanta at a program. We did a little thing. He was touring for Juice Newton, so Rebecca and I rented a suite and did a little thing after the thing to give some refreshment to the band and this kind of thing. I talked to Mike Huey's, to Juice Newton's manager, and I said something like, "We're glad you got our friend Mike Huey to be your drummer. He said, you don't know Mike. And I said, yes, I know. I've known him all his life. He said, well, Mike Huey is the one drummer in L.A. that decides who he's going to play for. I thought that's pretty good, you know. And about 2 years ago, before Mike had this illness, he came home, and we were out to eat, and Mike said, I'm buying. Honey Boo Boo's been good to me this year. I said, what are you talking about? He said, I guess you didn't know I produced the music for her TV shows. and so these are just examples, and I'm leaving out many others who have worked here and made an amazing impact on this thing. And as I said, history is dynamic. There are so many people who have worked here and become music people. Friday night, tonight, at Villarica's Civic Center, there's a senior dance for 50 plus. There's going to be 4 people making music at that thing that are part of all this history. Jim Finley, Phil Cooley, Jonathan Dorsey, in the Southern Remedy Band, Gary Duke, you know, Alan Duke's brother, like we mentioned, they're playing tonight. So history goes on, you know. So how much time do we have?
We probably got about 10 minutes. I mean,
okay.
we can go 38 minutes, I think, because we have no programming, right? I'm still guessing we're not on. Yeah, we still have no programming. You can go 38 minutes if you want to.
Oh, well, anyway. Tell me if we need to do a commercial. We got to pay the bills.
Okay, absolutely.
Okay. Okay, another dynamic, Tanner Hospitals. Are they sponsors of this program?
They are sponsors.
All right. So I'm amazed to know that many people, even hospital employees that I talk to, don't really know the important place that Tanner has played in this nation's hospital history. Again, I had nothing to do with it, but we were privileged to have Mr. Martin's notes and correspondence with Judge Bob Tysinger as they wrote the grant application that along with a wonderful gift from the John Tanner family, built and opened Tanner Memorial Hospital. After World War II, there were many programs developed to help rebuild this country, especially in rural America. The United States Congress passed the Hill-Burton Act, designed to help build new hospitals in rural America. Carroll County was fortunate enough to have Judge Tysinger, who had relationships all over Washington, Atlanta, everywhere. Judge was an amazing person, and we'll talk more about Carroll EMC. He was even the
Founder.
Judge. I mean, he was never a judge. He was even the attorney for the REA, National REA, for a time in Washington. But he had a relationship in Washington, and as a result, he got an application approved early for Tanner Memorial Hospital to become the first Hill-Burton hospital built in the United States. And so that's important history. This dynamic history continues for all of us. My wife was there. I was not there as it opened in 1949 and signed the book on the Register of Visitors as they opened that. My father-in-law was on the board at that time as that hospital was developed. So we've attended many of the events at Tanner showcasing the new technologies. Tanner's done an amazing job of growing with the technology and bringing things to Carrollton. I remember when the emergency room had only 3 rooms. They were landing helicopters next to a tree down there that was just dangerous. And that emergency room would get crowded as we go in there to see about news stories. We had a disaster where a large number of people got poisoned, and they had to actually bring in hospital beds. At that time, the funeral homes had hospital beds that they loaned out to people for rehab at home. We didn't have rehab in those days, but they had to bring in hospitals and fill the parking lot up with hospital beds to treat all those people. That has its own story, and anyway, but it was just amazing how Tanner has expanded, and I was excitedly waiting to tour the New York Emergency Department as they built that new emergency department, and then I was sad to have to wait several weeks after a large water pipe broke in the ceiling, and I heard that on the scanner. I went down and I watched the fire. It was just sickening to watch them, huge amounts of water flow out of there, and they had to repair all that. I remember them showcasing the new, is it called Da Vinci surgery machine? I got a chance to go in there for a display that they had and actually put on the goggles, as I call them, the headpiece, and move those things around in there for a display. So I've been lucky to watch Tanner do that. And now we have the Heart Center, where amazing doctors are performing open heart surgery and other procedures that very few communities have in this state, and they've really been there, a dynamic history. But our listeners will be amazed that what's going to becoming at Tanner over the years. Let me just give you a glimpse of that. Most of the best health technologies have been developed over the years by small companies in very small places. Many of these out of the country, in Europe and other places. Hospitals have had to wait for this people to develop these things and get them on a size and scale where they become available nationwide, and then they compete to try to get these things done. Tanner is developing a plan to attract those small companies and give them incentives to come and locate right here in Carrollton, Georgia, and move their operations here so that Tanner can be the first to adopt some of these new technologies. History is dynamic. It's very, very important as a dynamic part of our history. Okay. Carroll, I'm getting to the end of my 30 minutes, but Carroll EMC is another part of dynamic history. And we look back at Carroll EMC being one of the early, and Judge Tysinger, as I said, was a part of the REA development for this whole United States. And Carroll EMC was one of the early electrical membership corporations. I feel close to that. My father worked for North Georgia Electric, and that was his career. And so a lot of things are happening, and we might be able to talk about Carroll EMC and its history, because yesterday I was at the Lions Club and they presented a program on what some of the things that they are doing right now. They're developing a program that will identify individual customers who are having spikes in their electric bill instantly, very quickly, so they can contact and say, hey, there may be a problem at your house. Can we help you? So that they can save money. So we're right on the edge of technology where this history blends itself in many ways with what happened back there in 1934 to bring us up today.
Doyle, a life well lived. I mean, I think about all those connections you make and that you're able to hold on to. I mean, that's great. I mean, that should be a good example for everybody else. I mean, just to get out. Yeah, it's just because you got out and experienced things.
And I would say to our listeners, do you know the mayor? If you don't, turn the TV off. Go one Monday night and sit down, not to protest, no, but go and sit down and listen. Carry your family, After it's over with, hang around, meet the mayor. I guarantee you they will tell you that they appreciate you coming. If you have a question about what's coming on, ask. You get an answer. There's been so many instances, and I've been a part of that. I worked at Carrollton Federal. I've worked through the city. I've worked through all those things. I went. I'll give you an example quickly. I would have wanted to put an electronic sign up. The sign ordinance has always been controversial. They were allowing these crazy things to be set out here on the side of the road with flashing lights and all that distracted. But I want to put an electric sign up for our new branch of Carrollton Federal on South Park Street next to the motel. And I went to the city manager, Dudley Croston, and I said, Dudley, I want to put up this electronic sign, and I need to get the things changed. He said, you'll do that over my dead body. I said, Dudley, you better get your casket measured up, because I'm going to put one up. And we laughed and went on, and I put the sign up. But so if you'll develop the right kind of relationships and deal with people in the right kind of way, you can get things done, and you can be a part of this history. And that's what I hope all of our listeners will see and help celebrate this wonderful 200-year history that we have.
Doyle, you're a star, buddy. I appreciate you coming out. See, I knew you'd be a good show. I knew. That's why I reached out to you. I think we're still just on AM right now. I don't think FM's working. But I think Joel may have recorded us for Facebook, and we'll play that later. So you can go back and watch yourself on Facebook later on today.
Oh, okay.
And we'll still get all the promotion out there.
All right.
But again, thank you, man. I appreciate you coming out.
Enjoyed it so much. Thank you for the opportunity.
You did study for the whole week to put that
all right.
together. Thank you.
Thank
you.
you.
It's 9:01, but we're going to shut down the program, and hopefully the engineers will come in here and get things going, or whoever is supposed to come fix it. But right now we don't have anything working at all. So everybody have a great weekend, and thank you for tolerating us on AM 1330 this morning. And like I say, I hope we should be back up and running very, very soon. Again, have a good weekend.